Mic check 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's me, Tim Keys, and I wanted to come on here real quick and talk about FL Studio Patcher. Now, for those of us who are long-term users of FL Studio, or I should say, those of you who are long-term users, most of you are probably already familiar with Patcher and its capabilities. For somebody like me, I've had FL Studio for a couple years now, and I'm still trying to get used to the workflow and taking advantage of all the different features that it provides. And I think Patcher is really cool in the sense that, like, it's that DAW's primary way of like allowing you to chain multiple effects or different synths together and then put them all under one interface and give you the ability to customize that interface to your liking so you could do different things. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it just because, I'm just trying to get used to it. But everything seems to be pretty much straightforward for right now. Like, you pick your favorite VST plugin, whatever, and you can, in theory, make a fairly customizable instrument, which I think is pretty cool. I think I appreciate the fact that you can line everything up. Everything is fairly straightforward to add. If you want to add like different buttons, different knobs, everything is right there. And then like in terms of the size, you can pretty much within reason, so to speak, you can pretty much do whatever it is you want in terms of like how big you want to get the knob, how much you want to stretch it out. And that's something I appreciate. Like if I want to make the knob, and I know it's simple, like I'm talking about knobs, like it's a big deal. But if I want to make the knob like super duper big and just stretch it out, all I got to do is click on this icon. And so I think that's fairly neat. Like, because if I want to make a simplified interface where I have like, I got, let's say I wanted one knob, and then let me put it, if I can get it back here to, I did this last night, so I apologize for messing up. But if I wanted one knob and then I wanted to go and, determine how much I wanted, like for let's say I had two VST plugins and I wanted to have it set up that like one side had, volume exclusively for one synth, and then I had another synth and I had it set up where the knob exclusively turned on another synth all the way up. I could kind of do that here, which I think is pretty neat. Like it gives you that ability to customize stuff and something as simple as like how big you want your knobs or how big you want your buttons. You could go ahead and do that. So if I want to make a giant button, stretch it out as long as I need it to be or as small as I need it to be, I can kind of do that, which makes on one end like the GUI interface. Oh my word. It makes the GUI interface fairly straightforward. I'm not about to cut that out. I'm just going to leave it as is. But it makes everything fairly straightforward when you want to go about customizing your own instruments or your own effects, and I think that's pretty cool. Now, the B-sides of what I don't like about Patcher thus far is twofold. Like, with all this flexibility, I find it, at least for right now, harder to line everything up the way I want it. Like, yeah, I can stretch it out, but there's like no lines to like, there's no guiding lines to determine like if everything is even. So like I got to be really careful in terms of how I go about moving these over because there's no like set lines that kind of like, you know, help guide you to make sure everything is even. So as flexible as it is in one sense, um, something as simple as having like the guided markers or whatnot, so you can even out everything and make sure everything is just right. Um, you kind of don't have that luxury here. That's okay. That's a small pet peeve. If you take your time, you can kind of get everything to where you want it to be, and that's all right. Um, the B sides, I would say, is what I really don't like. Is when you're going to set up your instruments, right? what I find problematic is you would think that FL Studio would allow you to take multiple samplers and throw it in Patcher. And unfortunately, it does not allow you to do that. Like you can click on sampler, clicking on this arrow going down here, add a plugin. It shows you the different list of plugins. These are the stock devices. And if I wanted to add a sampler, I can't do it. Which, when I read about this online, they said it was because like the resources that FL Studio uses to, boot up sampler, it's what they call a hybrid plugin or a hybrid synth. I don't know what that means. Outside of like just from reading about it, it uses up multiple resources and different things, which I can kind of see. But in the same sense, I would find that part problematic because, like, in my opinion, the easiest way to make a customized synth in FL Studio is by implementing the sampler. And so there's some workarounds. Like there's some free samplers you can use that kind of have that ability. But one of the things I like about FL Studio sampler is how it handles one shots. Like you could take a one shot and the time stretch algorithm is pretty good. And so you can really stretch that sample across the keys and get to work with, customizing the sounds and whatnot. And in theory, a one shot doesn't take up as much space because you're only dealing with one sample and you just spread it across the entire, key bed, if you will. And then you just worry about your time stretch algorithm, which, FL Studio has a pretty good time stretch algorithm in general. I don't know how much memory it uses, but I would say like that's the only downside. Now, if you had, on the other hand, like I have the producer edition, I might bite the bullet one day and pick up the everything bundle just so I can have access to I think it's their big boy edition sample. I can't even recall. Direct Wave. Direct Wave is really nice. That will give you the ability to have like a multi-sampled bass instrument. I could also use the sound font player to work around this, but I'm using my laptop and my laptop doesn't have a lot of my sound fonts available. And it's just a different workflow when it comes to how FL Studio handles the sound font players or the sound fonts versus how it handles the one shots. Not that I can't do anything with this, because I definitely can. Like you have enough here to make adjustments, but in my head, I prefer. In my head, I prefer being able to just pull up the sampler and bypass, if you will, the limitations of patch. Not the patcher. Pardon me. The limitations of like only being able to use one sampler and like use a bunch of samplers. Like if I want to use like 3 samplers and have it in one patcher to be able to make a simple like multi-layered instrument, I can't really do that with Patcher. And so I hope that's something that FL Studio will fix or address for upgrade. Otherwise, it's no big deal. There are like multiple free samplers and different samplers I could use to, mitigate and navigate through that. There are quite a few samplers, VST plugins that will allow you to upload more than one sample in the deal. Now, I'm pulling up Reason Combinator because in this case, they're very similar. Like I did a video on the Combinator probably 4 years ago and talked about Reason's Combinator. So if you want more information on that, check that out. And if you don't watch my video, you can pull up any video on Reason's Combinator from Reason 12. And, you got the advantage per se of, let me exit out of here. You have the advantage of being able to add different instruments on the fly. You can add any instrument within Reason's, ecosystem and throw it in. So in that respect, like that makes, other plugins that have similar features like Reasons Combinator or Ableton's. I think Ableton has like their own like custom rack unit. Same idea where you can combine different instruments and different plugins and whatnot. That's exclusive to Ableton, and you could put it in a rack, and you could just go to town on it. So you could, in theory, let's say you all you had was Simpler in Ableton, you can make a custom instrument where you had more than one instance of Simpler to have a multi-layered instrument if you didn't have Sampler. And I think again the advantage of that, I can't remember if Sampler uses like a time stretch algorithm within the device itself. I know that Simpler has multiple time stretch engines and whatnot. I don't think Sampler does, but if you didn't have Sampler, because Sampler will allow you to multi-stack an instrument, you could, use like the rack unit in Ableton and just use Simpler, have multiple instances of Simpler loaded up, and customize your instrument however you want to. And that's pretty cool. And that would, even if you didn't have Sampler, that would, mitigate some of that need per se. Here in Combinator, you do have the ability to add, like I said earlier, whatever instrument you wanted to add. And so I could just throw in like Mimic if I wanted to, Grain. Let me just type in Grain because I'm being lazy. And just throw that mug in. I did it wrong. Shame on me. Go back. Put it underneath. Now, if I was really doing this the right way, I would have not only my mixer, but I would also have the second utilities I would put in my line mixer, and I would connect these both that way. But just for the sake of what the heck and just doing this, I could, and let's say if I wanted another instrument, I'm just gonna throw it in there for kicks. So now I got two, and you can see them here and right there. I'm not trying to make anything fancy, but I really wish that FL Studio would allow you to do that with the sampler. Like, that would be amazing if you could take FL Studio sampler, throw it in Patcher, and throw like 3 of these together and have it all in one customizable interface. Have 3 different samples, have your instruments laid out, and then set up your interface however you needed to set it up. That would be amazing. But such is not the case. The other thing I would say about Reasons Combinator is the fact that you can go in and let me see if I can go back to configure. If I wanted to add a switch backdrop, I could change all that stuff. I know you can do this in FL. You can make the buttons bigger. You don't get the option of like that nice drag and drop, which that stinks. But what you can do is like you have the guiding lines that can help you match everything up evenly. So you can keep everything in proportion with all the buttons and knobs as you set it up. And, you can get really in depth. And again, like I'm just learning Patcher. So it's quite possible that there's a way to do all of that in the same vein here. And I just haven't figured it out yet. Either way, I do love Patcher conceptually. I like the fact that you can set all this stuff up. It really adds a lot of extra value, in my opinion, to the DAW, especially when you come to think about the fact that FL Studio is $99 for the entry level, $178 for producer edition, $200, $300 for like signature, and like $400 and some change for like the big homie edition. And you have lifetime free updates. Like, you really can't beat this. Again, I just wish they would allow you the ability to upload the sampler into the patcher and have like multiple instances. But outside of that, if you're somebody who just wanted to take whatever you built for yourself and put it in the customizable interface, so you didn't have to always pull up like an instance of Jupyter and then an instance of like whatever effects change you use in like Jupyter, your reverbs, your choruses, your delays, or whatever. You could have everything wrapped up in a simple interface and just get to work. I think that's pretty cool. All right, that's enough. That's all I have for this video. I'm going to hop off of here. Thank you for watching. I am Tim Keys. I am out. Peace.